Hello, I am your favorite movie critic, Edwin on Film. After the Nucleon Ball met its explosive demise, Emperor Guillotine's orders brought help in from a far planet, Dr. Ulver, called Dr. Botanus in the American version. As the name implies, this bald, silver scientist comes to Earth with the seed of the devilish alien plant, the Satan Rose, or the Gargoyle Vine in the American version, again. After getting his orders, we see that our garish gardener has the power of invisibility and a very haunting laugh. His first mission is to kidnap Dr. Dorian. He accomplishes this by turning invisible to get past the guard, then he sneaks up on the sleeping Dorian by walking upside down like a bat. But he's not Batman. Dr. Dorian is helpless to resist when Botanus reaches out his clawed hand and breathes a kind of knockout gas from his mouth. The scene ends with his granddaughter waking up and not being able to find him. Where is he, you ask? Why are you asking? He is unconscious in the car of the Gargoyle's gang. The Devil Doctor is explaining to Spider. Didn't Spider get blown up in the last episode? Who edited this? Well, anyway, the devilish Dr. Botanus explains to Spider that he intends to force Dorian into making his Gargoyle Vine grow throughout the world, destroying Earth's defenses and opening us up to Guillotine's invading forces. Gargoyle Gang's headquarters are in some round gray water tanks in a deserted field. Spider and Botanus tell the indignant Dr. Dorian he is going to help them with growing the Gargoyle Vine from this huge seed they show him. Looks more like an egg. And when Dorian says he would rather die than be responsible for world destruction, Botanus responds, "His brain needs adjusting. Get the scalpel now." The scene ends with Dorian unconscious on an operating table and a saw blade descending on his skull. Wasn't even facing the right way. Under the wickedly smiling supervision of Dr. Botanus. It's a disappointed granddaughter who leaves the police station in a daze. She is so lost in thought, she is almost run over by Jerry Mono. As Johnny Sacco talks to her, finding out the Dorian's disappearance, Agent Mono receives an urgent message from Unicorn. Scene shifts to the Gargoyle Gang's headquarters where Dr. Botanus' brain surgery is a success. How? What? Dorian is now his slave. Botanus orders him to grow the Gargoyle Vine from the huge seed he is handed. Still looks like an egg. While the newly docile Dr. Dorian works to grow the seed, the botanical blackguard informs Spider that the brain surgery wears off in a few hours. Dorian must finish before then. Scene switches to Jerry and Johnny using the old hidden entrance and a phone booth trick to enter Unicorn headquarters. Once they are assigned to look into the disappearances of Dr. Dorian, who incidentally just completed hatching the Gargoyle Vine, a botanist claims that it will grow so big it will destroy the planet. Agents Mono and Sacco are informed by their granddaughter that Dorian was studying space plants and discovered a particularly dangerous one, called the Gargoyle Vine. Spider, masquerading as a florist, plants a baby Gargoyle Vine in the restaurant. It quickly grows and scares off all the people. Back at Gargoyle HQ, Botanus is supervising more speeds to be hatched. Dorian comes out of his stupor and stops the growth of gargoyle seeds. Botanus subdues the old man and orders him to be taken away. Cut to Dorian's house, where Jerry and Johnny find Dr. Dorian's research. An invisible, insidious Dr. Botanus steals the notebook from them and escapes. The drugged Dr. Dorian comes through the wall and collapses at their feet. How convenient. As our heroes and the good doctor's granddaughter drive him to the hospital, isn't she like 6? The Badman of Botany contacts Unicorn, bragging to the chief that the Gargoyle Vine will wipe them all out. The vine grows to kaiju size and begins destroying the city. With Dorian safely on his way to the hospital, Mono and Sacco jet back to the middle of the city. They find a now totally mobile plant monster using magnetic powers to make mincemeat of the city and the Japanese defense forces. Why does it have legs, though? Johnny calls the giant robot and the battle begins. At first, the tentacles of the giant vine keep the robot at bay by battering his head and shoulders. Finally, Robot uses his missile launchers and power punch to soften up his foe. Tentacles fly, fast and furious, at our champion, but he is able to fend them off until the Gargoyle Vine releases its poison pollen. This weakens the giant robot enough that it's able to get the upper hand on him. It immobilizes Big G by wrapping him in its crushing tentacles. After dealing with the robot, the Space Vine continues its rampage towards the hospital, where Chief and Dr. Dorian are. The Chief watched helplessly as the Vine begins to bury the giant robot. Johnny can't get the robot to stand. Eventually, the drug wears off of Dr. Dorian, who revives. The Chief contacts Johnny Sacco, letting him know that Dr. Dorian figured out that the plant can't take electricity. Johnny let the robot know. The mechanical monster slayer kicks a power plant. The electrical charge shoots through his metal body and destroys the Gargoyle Vine. This does not sit well with Emperor Guillotine, who lets Botanus know that he only gets one more chance to succeed in destroying the giant robot. Can he do it? We shall see.
Guns don't hurt that plant, Commander.
You three, giant robot, call him.
Right. Now, giant robot, I need you downtown.
There he is, at last, the flying robot. The Gargoyle Vine will tear out his transistors.
Hail of the Tape, Gargoyle Vine. In Johnny Sacco and His Flying Robot, also known as Giant Robo, Episode 3, a villainous plant creature is featured, known as the Gargoyle Vine in the United States, and as Satan Rose in Japan. Oh my, that could get very confusing, I would think. In any case, here is the tale of the tape for our monster. Species, a giant mutated plant monster. Appearance, resembles a massive, menacing plant often depicted with thorny vines, tentacle-like appendages, and a large central flower, or mouth, which is dangerous and carnivorous. And I would imagine very hungry, too. Powers, vine attacks. It can use its massive thorny vines to grab, entangle, and crush its enemies, kind of like a wrestling rhododendron. They're poisonous attacks. The creature releases toxic spores or gas which can incapacitate or harm anyone in its vicinity, thus without even eating beans. Now, that's impressive. Regeneration. Being plant-based, it shows some level of regenerative ability, making it hard to destroy by conventional means. Magnetic power. Able to employ magnetism to throw around metal objects. You could say this plant is very attractive. I'm kind of clever, aren't I? Well, anyway. Defeated by Giant Robot, controlled by Johnny Sacco, who ultimately destroys that Gargoyle Vine after a fierce battle. Robot uses its one weakness, electricity, to explode the vegetable gone wrong into cooked squash. Yeah! This episode is a great example of the kaiju monster battles that made Johnny Sacco and his flying robot iconic in its time.